In the quiet dawn of the medieval world, the story of leather begins not in workshops or markets, but in fields wet with morning mist where cattle grazed. Slowly under gray skies, and every hide carried the weight of survival because nothing was wasted and everything had a purpose. Leather was not fashion. It was shelter, armor, footwear, belts, saddles, and lifelines, and people understood this with an intimacy modern hands no longer remember as villages woke to the sound of church bells and roosters, the smell of smoke and damp earth mixed with the raw scent of animal hides, stretched on wooden frames, and this was a world where time moved with seasons, not trends, where a single pair of leather boots might walk with a man from youth into old age and be passed down again. The tanning pits lay beyond the town walls near rivers, their surfaces dark and still like mirrors, hiding secrets beneath, and men worked there with stained hands and weathered faces, stirring vats of oak bark, willow leaves, and urine, knowing by smell, touch, and instinct when the hide was ready, because this knowledge lived in muscle. Memory, not manuals, and leather lasted because it was given time, months, sometimes years, soaking, drying, resting, absorbing. The slow chemistry of nature while winter winds howled through forests and summers baked stone roads under bare feet. The leather drank smoke oils, animal fats, and plant tannins until it became dense, flexible, and alive, and when torches flickered against ancient stone walls inside castles and halls, leather creaked softly under armor-strapped saddles, groaned beneath riders, and gloves darkened with sweat, and use each sound proof of endurance. This leather did not crack because it was never rust. It did not peel because it was never stripped of its soul, and people respected it. They cleaned it, mended it, fed it oils the same way they fed themselves, bread and broth, and in marketplaces filled with echoes and voices leather goods carried stories, scars from battle marks, from tools, rain stains from long journeys, and this first truth becomes clear: medieval leather lasted centuries because it was born from patience, necessity, and reverence, not speed, profit, or replacement. And as the medieval world breathed slowly, leather breathed with it, aging, not dying, enduring, not expiring, waiting quietly for us to remember why it once refused to fail. The torchlight flickered against ancient stone. The heart of the medieval leather mystery reveals itself deeper in the shadows of the tanning yards, where survival demanded respect for nature rather than domination over it, and every step followed rhythms older than written language. Because medieval tanners did not fight the hide, they listened to it. They understood that leather was once living skin, and if treated with violence it would return that violence by cracking, rotting, and failing too soon. So they moved slowly, deliberately, soaking hides in lime pits to loosen hair, then scraping them clean with curved blades, while cold river water numbed their hands, and winter breath rose like smoke around their faces. And then came the long communion with trees. Oak, chestnut, sumac bark crushed and steeped, releasing tannins that seeped into the hide fiber by fiber binding protein to plant in a marriage that time alone could complete. And this was not efficiency, it was devotion. Vats stood untouched for months, while seasons changed, birds migrated, and wars were fought beyond the town walls, and the leather waited, absorbing strength, becoming resistant to water, insects, and decay. And when it finally emerged, it was thick, heavy, and nearly indestructible, smelling of forest soil, smoke, and age, unlike modern leather, stripped thin and rushed through chemical baths that burn rather than nourish the hide. Medieval leather was fed oils rendered from animals and plants, worked in by hand, warmed by firelight and friction until the fibers relaxed and locked together, creating resilience that could bend without breaking. And this leather served lives built on hardship. Saddles carried knights across muddy roads, armor straps held during battle boots, crossed frozen fields and flooded paths, and failure meant injury or death. So quality was not optional, and when leather aged, it did not die, it darkened, gained character, its surface telling stories of rain, steel, sweat, and sun. And the reason modern leather collapses so quickly is because it is no longer allowed to live. It is split-shaved, coated, painted, and sealed, suffocating beneath synthetic skins that crack like lies after a few seasons. And the medieval world would not have understood such waste, because every hide was earned through labor, blood, and time, and nothing was disposable. When survival depended on endurance, and so part two of this forgotten truth is clear. Medieval leather lasted centuries because it was partnered with nature, not forced into submission, and because time was the most valuable tool they possessed, and they were patient enough to use it in the hush of early morning as frost clung to wooden doors and breath hung pale in the air. The final truth of medieval leather reveals itself not in the tannery but in the hands of those who wore it, lived with it, and cared for it, because leather was never finished once it left the craftsman. It continued to change, shaped by the body, molded by movement, and strengthened by care. And medieval people understood this instinctively. A belt was not just worn, it was tightened daily, absorbing warmth. Oils and sweat. Boots were not thrown away when they stiffened. They were softened by firelight, worked by hand, fed with fats and tallow until they yielded again. And in candlelit rooms, leather armor hung near hearths, breathing in smoke that repelled insects and moisture, while the crackle of wood and murmur of voices filled stone halls. And this ongoing relationship turned leather into a companion rather than a product, and even when damaged, it was repaired, not replaced, stitched, patched, reinforced, carrying visible scars that were marks of honor, not flaws. In every repair extended its life, sometimes for generations, because a father taught a son how to care for leather the same way. He taught him how to sharpen a blade or bake bread, and this knowledge traveled quietly through time, without books, without factories, only through touch, memory, and necessity. In the medieval world demanded responsibility. Objects were few, resources hard-earned, and ownership meant stewardship. In contrast, this with the modern world, where leather is treated as decorations sealed under plastic coatings, designed to shine briefly then fail, where care is replaced by convenience, and when cracking begins, it is hidden until collapse is inevitable. And modern leather dies young because no one is taught to listen to it, no one is expected to maintain it, and it is never meant to age gracefully. And as ancient forests whispered outside medieval towns and church bells marked the passing hours, leather lived alongside people, growing darker, softer, stronger, while modern leather remains frozen in false perfection, unable to breathe, unable to heal. And in this final understanding, the reason medieval leather endured for centuries becomes undeniable. It survived because humans allowed it to age alongside them, respecting time, honoring material, and accepting whereas life itself. And as we stand surrounded by objects meant to expire, the silent endurance of medieval leather becomes a challenge across centuries, asking whether we lost not the technology but the patience, the care, and the wisdom to let things live long enough to matter. As the winter wind howled through narrow streets and banners snapped above stone gates, the legacy of medieval leather moved beyond usefulness and into the realm of identity, because leather was not merely something people owned, it was something that marked who they were in a world where clothing spoke louder than words. A tanner carried the scent of bark and smoke. Soldier bore creased straps darkened by rain, and battle a traveler's satchel sagged heavy with miles and memories, and these objects aged together with their owners, darkening, hardening, softening in places where life pressed hardest. And this aging was not hidden, it was celebrated, because where proved survival, and leather that endured storms, mud, and blood became a visible record of resilience and belonging. And in guild halls, lit by candles, leather aprons protected Craftsmen while also declaring mastery, each stain a chapter of experience in churches and marketplaces. Leather shoes echoed against stone floors, reminding everyone that these materials connected people to animals, land forests, and labor, and nothing existed in isolation. Every hide carried the memory of pasture, grass, rain clouds, and human hands, and this connection shaped how leather was valued, protected, and preserved. And when death came, leather did not disappear, it passed on, inheriting new lives, new journeys, new purposes, sometimes reshaped, sometimes repaired, but rarely discarded, because objects held memory, and memory carried weight. And in contrast, the modern world strips leather of story, turning it into surface and shine sold under bright lights, detached from origin and destiny, designed to be replaced rather than remembered. And this severing breaks the cycle that once gave leather its strength, because endurance was not just in tanning methods or care routines, it lived in meaning. And when people believed an object mattered, it survived. And as medieval towns slept beneath starless skies, leather hung quietly near hearths, boots resting beside beds, armor laid carefully on wooden stands, absorbing warmth, smoke, and silence. And in that stillness, leather endured, not because it was indestructible, but because it was integrated into life, death, and legacy. And this final layer of understanding reveals why medieval leather outlived centuries, while ours fades within years. It was bound to identity, memory, and respect, and until those values return, no amount of technology will restore what time, patience, and reverence once made unbreakable. In the fading light of a medieval evening, as bells tolled and smoke drifted slowly into darkening skies, the story of leather reaches its quiet conclusion, not as a lesson, but as a reflection, because the endurance of medieval leather was never a miracle of lost science, but a mirror held up to how people once lived and what they valued. And as fires burned low in hearths, leather lay beside them, scarred, darkened, and alive, bearing the weight of years without shame. In this world accepted decay as part of endurance, and wear is proof of worth. And when leather finally failed, it did so after a lifetime of service, not after a season of display. And the modern world moves too fast to allow such relationships. We demand speed, softness, shine, and perfection, and in doing so we strip materials of the very conditions that allow them to survive, because leather, like land, like people, requires time, care, and humility to endure. And medieval craftsmen understood limits. They worked with nature rather than forcing outcomes, and medieval owners understood responsibility. They maintained, repaired, and respected what they possessed, because survival allowed no other choice. In this mindset shaped materials into companions rather than commodities. And today is surrounded by leather that cracks, peels, and dies young. We often blame manufacturing methods alone, but the deeper truth lies in our relationship with objects and time, because when nothing is meant to last, nothing is cared for long enough to do so. And as ancient forests once fed tanning vats and smoke, one sealed fibers against decay, patience sealed them against failure. And the echo of iron on anvils, the low chant of prayers, and the rhythm of seasons all contributed to a slower, stronger world where materials aged honestly and purposefully. And the silent message carried by centuries-old leather artifacts preserved in museums is not nostalgia, but warning that durability is born from restraint and respect, not excess and speed. And as the medieval night deepened, stars cold and distant above stone towns, leather rested, waiting for another dawn, another journey, another life. And the question left behind is not why medieval leather lasted, but whether we are willing to live slowly enough again to allow anything to endure beyond us.